set out onto my journey to have a little farm, getting a polytunnel was very high on my priority list. And I knew I wanted a big one, because there's nothing more frustrating than getting a small one and then later realizing that I should have gotten a bigger one. I got the space for it, why not go big from the start? I paid 1,580 euro for a 4.2 by 15.2 meter polytunnel, plus delivery. They also had a service for constructing the polytunnel for me, but I figured I could do this on my own. This is a story about how I built the polytunnel almost completely alone. The polytunnel came with 18 small poles, each around 1 meter 20 long. These were the feet of the polytunnel and were meant to be hammered deep into the ground to give the tunnel a proper foothold. Each of those had to be exactly 168 cm apart to keep the ratios intact. If one of those were off by over 10 cm, the rest of the build wouldn't fit anymore. With pre-drilled holes for the hoops and the support rods, I had to get the measurements nearly perfect. To make sure I got at least some of the lines right on my first try, I put masonry rope around the poles. Needless to say, it helped a lot. Something that I can say with keeping all of this in mind: don't ever trust your eyes, trust the measure tape. I redid some of the positionings of the poles based purely off my instinct, thinking that they were not aligned correctly. Turned out I was wrong and I wasted a bunch of time. Do yourself a favor and trust the measure tape. Moving on though, I still didn't have a sledgehammer, so a few remains of cement block had to help me through the first batch of poles that I had to hammer a meter into the ground. Not too long after that though, a local dude was so nice and lent me his sledgehammer. It sped up the process considerably. I have my own sledgehammer now for future projects, by the way. After hammering a few posts in, I put the hoops on to get a feel for the rest of the build. I also put the first support rods on. Well, I tried. I built myself a little helping hand, but this was a step that I ended up getting some help on. A second pair of hands can be surprisingly helpful with delicate stuff like this. Fast forward a day, all the posts were in and the hoops on top. You might think, most of the work is already done, that shouldn't have been too hard. You're right, it wasn't that hard, but the hard part was yet to come, or instead of hard you could say excruciatingly slow and stamina consuming work. The way the polytunnel was set up, it required a trench all around the posts, where you could bury the foil in the end. The foil came in one big package and had to be tight on the hoops, and the only way of achieving this would be to have something weighing down on the foil itself and keeping it tight for many years to come. With that being said, it's time to roll the shovel arc. Start the clip, Drago. I'm gonna be brutally honest here. It took me a month to finish digging this trench, even with one day of having friends come over and help me dig. Of course, some days were in there where I simply didn't want to dig or had other things to take care of, but overall, I'm glad I did it. I went a bit overboard here and there and probably dug the trench a bit too wide or a bit too deep, but I'd rather be safe than sorry. My limbs waved the white flag a few times, intimidating me with aching muscles and consistent pain. Please take care of your limbs if you work a lot physically. You only have one pair each. A minor injury can lead to a major one if left ignored for too long. You might have noticed a change in what happened inside the polytunnel in the previous montage. Back in mid-April, roughly 2 months before I started digging the trench, I planted some seeds in hopes of growing something. Turns out it did grow. So much in fact that I had to make a grow bed for it because it definitely didn't fit into the small seed box anymore. But more of what I planted and how it turned out in another video. After the trench was done, I had to put the wooden posts in for the door, which, what do you know, had to be buried deep into the ground to give it a proper hold. I obviously couldn't hammer those in, so I had to manually dig deep holes for them. The polytunnel came with a front and a back door to allow for airflow, which you desperately need in a polytunnel, else your plants start to blight and die. On a side note, yes, my plants caught blight because I kept the door shut. They are fine though, I learned my lesson there. Shush. Where was I? 2 doors, 2 posts, connecting posts, making sure it's angle. There were also these side thingies. I literally don't have a better name for them. I don't even know if it makes a difference whether they are there or not, but I got them for the polytunnel, so I might as well use them. I used tension belts to make sure the door would actually fit between the posts and not just have a gaping hole whenever I shut it. It worked quite well after putting tension on it for a night, gave it enough time to adjust the earth around the poles and keep it in place. The reasons I don't put the doors in for good at this point is because the foil doesn't have holes for the doors, so the doors are literally the very last piece that has to fit the puzzle. What was also not on yet was the hotspot tape. Since it gets very hot in the polytunnel, the metal poles get hot as well. So hot, in fact, that it might melt the polythene plastic cover on the spots where they touch. To prevent that, I put this tape on all the places where the polythene cover is sure to be touching the metal spots. So basically, all over the place. That was the last step before putting on the cover. I asked around if someone could help me put it on, but everyone was busy. So I prepared myself mentally and said, fuck it, I'll do it alone. Unpacking the foil alone left me dumbfounded about how the fuck I would even begin to achieve this task. I had a general idea though. The idea was to tie a rope around the foil and drag it across the length of the polytunnel. While the idea itself was fine, the practical part of it left something to be desired for. The foil alone was at least 25 kilograms. And if you ever lifted 25 kilograms, you know that it's easier to lift it if it is solid instead of nearly liquid. By constantly adjusting and tying it to the next hoop for keeping up the pressure instead of only relying on my own strength, I actually made quite a good amount of progress. Mind you, this section alone took 2 hours of constant adjusting and repositioning. While I was dragging the foil into position, I noticed a few small imprints on the foil, which read "inside". I couldn't notice any difference in material though between the outside and the inside at the time. This would come and bite me in the back slowly after. After I finished setting it up around the tunnel, it was time for the unveiling. I started slowly pulling the foil to the sides and could already notice how effective this polythene foil really was with the sun shining down on it.
Not gonna lie, with the heat being the heat it is right now, I think this is gonna get really hot really fast. And that might be the understatement of the century.
Continuing this slowly and carefully, being on a relatively large field, there was bound to be a few breezes of wind here and there. And it wasn't long until I got a small taste of it.
Oh. Yep, that's air for you. That's air.
At this point I was already 80% done with putting the foil on, but I noticed the print near the end, which said "inside" on the outside. That was the point where I got to the edge of the foil to really determine whether it made a difference or not. Before unveiling, the foil was folded so many times that most of the touchable parts were at the same side, thus clouding my judgment at the start.
Oh, it is different. I might have to redo this whole thing.
Having realized the severity of the lost coin flip, I felt devastated. I just spent 3 hours preparing for this and I was about to having to do it all over again. However, I knew with the wind slowly picking up that I didn't have much time to dawdle on.
Well, that's gonna be almost impossible. Let's make it possible though, shall we?
So I started at the part where it didn't unfold yet, flipped it around and began pulling back the unfolded foil towards the middle with the intention of swapping the sides around. Whilst I was in the middle of figuring out which side was supposed to be which.
Trust in what I did. Flip it around. Don't think, just flip.
Mother Nature graced us with a little breeze.
And it's gone. Hello darkness, my old friend. I've come to bargain yet again.
I figured it was time to wipe the slate clean and start from the top. But this time, since I knew which side had to be inside, I went through the foil and flipped it into position before trying to put it on. After that, well, you could say I manhandled the whole situation a bit more. Instead of tactics, I used brute force, which of course didn't come without consequences.
Oh, fucking hell. There's the first rip. There's the very first rip in my polytunnel. Fucking hell.
Now I don't know if my parents are psychic beings who foresaw this would happen, but they sent me a set of clamps like this. And oh boy, they have saved my day. With only a few anchor points, the whole situation improved drastically. And shortly after, I managed to get the foil with the right side on the inside in position. I secured it with anything that I could find so that the wind wouldn't blow it away. A pallet, a tire, the first few shovels of earth, and it worked. After I got it in place, it was time for the actual anchor to come into place. That being all the earth that I shoveled out of the trench back into it, over the overlap of the foil. I went back into the polytunnel to get my phone, which I left inside in the heat of the battle, and you could say the polytunnel was doing a good job of trapping the heat.
Oh my god, it's warm. Fuck. Oh. Jesus Christ. My phone is literally too hot to hold.
The time, however, was ticking. All of my plants and vegetables were currently inside this monster of a polytunnel, trapped without nearly any airflow and cooking away. So I couldn't gloat in my achievement for too long and had to get the entranceways cut open. After making sure that every side of the polytunnel had enough foil, I got a knife and started carving a hole. Not gonna lie, pretty nerve-wracking to intentionally cut the very foil which is supposed to serve the tunnel. Nearly an hour after putting the foil on, the polytunnel now having no airflow with the earth trapping all of the pathways for air, the temperature inside was steadily rising, and I very much felt that while preparing the foil from the inside of the tunnel.
What the fuck? I'm completely wet.
I made a provisional hole for the time being, since all the slack had to be eliminated from all over the tunnel first before I could put in the doors. Also, I was completely exhausted at that point, which is why I wanted to do it another day. The next day, I began seriously filling the trench with the earth and stretching the slack out of the polytunnel.
Roll the clip, Drago!
Installing the doors was pretty straightforward, taking all the slack and stretching it to its utmost limits before screwing it into the door frame with a piece of wood. Making sure that no ugly bits stick out or get in the way, I cut the foil into smaller pieces at specific places to get a clean grip on them. All that was left was putting on the hinges, or so I thought. Because the dimensions were less even than I thought, I had to shovel the way free of earth to have it open all the way. One door down, one door left. Same principle here, getting rid of all the slack, stretching it and putting the door in. And that was it, my journey of constructing the polytunnel. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please like it and subscribe to my channel. It helps out a lot.